All right. First of all, a very good morning to our esteemed speaker for today, Mr. Sriram Pachu. He's the man himself and he's the crusader of the mediation movement in India, and also the students attending the program and the entire team of Youth Bar Association of India. President of the Youth Bar Association of India, Mr. Sanpreet sir. So this is, as we discussed earlier, so as sir was asking, this is the ninth day of the 10-day long virtual summer workshop on mediation. And we are privileged and we've been enlightened so far by legal luminaries like Mr. Rakesh Khanna, Mr. Datta, Mr. Tulsi, who's the former Additional Solicitor General of India, and Mr. Tae Ju Lin, Deputy CEO, Singapore International Mediation Center. We've discussed all the broad aspects of mediation. Today, the topic for the day is the Singapore Convention on Mediation. And the Singapore Convention on Mediation is basically the international settlement agreements that take place as a result of mediation in international forums. This is just as a brief introduction of the topic. And of course, sir will take us forward with the topic. Before any further ado, I would like to introduce Mr. Sriram Pachu. So, virtual summer school or mediation would not have been complete in true sense without having Sir here, who's, as I said earlier, is the crusader of the mediation movement in India. Honorable Mr. Pachu is an alumnus of Government Law School, Bombay. He commenced practice in 1976 at the Madras High Court and was designated a senior advocate in 1996. For almost 30 years, he has been in the forefront of mediation movement in India. In fact, in 2005, he set up India's first court-annexed mediation center at the Madras High Court and also assisted the Supreme Court and other high courts to do so. He has trained over 1,000 mediators so far. Some of the important books that Sir has written on mediation are Settle for More and Mediation Practice in Law and the Commercial Mediation Monograph. Sir has also been appointed as the Sir was appointed as the Supreme Court by the Supreme Court of India to mediate in several issues like the border dispute between Assam and Nagaland and the famous Babri Masjid case, which has been going on. Sir, along with Honorable Justice Khalifullah and Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, were the mediators in that case. Sir is a member of the NALSA, which is the National Legal Service Authority of India, president of the National Association of Mediators. Sir is also the director of International Mediation Institute. And not to forget, in fact, looking at today's topic, Sir is on the panel of mediators in the Singapore International Mediation Center. In December 2018, the Bar Association of India conferred on him its Lawyers of India Award of Honors and Distinction. Sir, it is because of your efforts and endeavors that our country has been able to shift to this the alternate dispute redressal system, and we could understand it better, sir. Uh, Before we commence the session, I will quickly tell the panelists and the attendees about the scheme of the session. So we will start with the address of the Chief Speaker for the day, Mr. Sriram Pachu, and then we'll move ahead with the question and answer round, which will be by the attendees. And thereafter, I will hand over the mic to Mr. Sanpreet, who's the President of the Youth Bar Association of India. May I request Sir to please begin his address?
Thank you very much, Chitrangna. Can you hear me well?
Yes, sir, we can hear
Yes,
you well.
thank you. That's indeed a lot of praise for a Sunday morning. So thank you very much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here with all of you, especially with old friends from Singapore and Santan from Delhi. Now, let me straight off the bat, you've been through 10 sessions so far. So I don't think I need to spend time with you talking to you on what mediation is. I mean, you all know it's a consensual process, which is voluntary, it's confidential, and the idea is to reach a settlement which the parties want, rather than what a third person wants to impose on them, and that it's enforceable. You also, I think, gained a fair understanding of the way it works, getting people to focus on long-term interests, on their larger perspectives, opening up the room for communication and understanding and listening. Um, and you would, I think, also know the benefits of mediation, that it ticks off really virtually all the boxes. The boxes you want for dispute resolution: cost, time, solutions, participation of parties, and enforceability. It ticks off these boxes. And at the end of this session, I'll talk to you about a larger perspective of mediation in India and the way forward. But let me do one thing which I invariably do when I begin these talks, and that is to tell you that mediation is not in a competitive business. We are not here saying that, the adversarial system is wrong or that arbitration is wrong. What we say is that for every kind of a dispute, there is a particular kind of remedy which is best suited. And that for certain kinds of disputes, especially personal matters and commercial matters, and matters between people where there are relationships involved, mediation is the most appropriate kind of remedy. The law courts are the best forum for certain kinds of disputes relating to justice and where directions of court are necessary. The arbitrator's table is an ideal forum when you have to lead a lot of evidence and go through things in detail. So it's never a question, of saying one is better than the other. It's always a question of saying which is more appropriate. And in mediation, I think we have brought that kind of holistic completeness and a comprehensive look to dispute resolution. So that's one thing, please bear in mind. Let's come to Singapore Convention. Years from now, when people will look at the growth of mediation, they will focus on Singapore Convention as one of the benchmarks, the milestones. And why is that so? That is so because in terms of the world of business, it is the Singapore Convention which will mark the reason why business disputes get taken to mediation. This will be the turning point in it. So let me explain this. As I said, a lot of the boxes are ticked off when it came to mediation, but there was one residual doubt in the minds of business people. How will we enforce a mediation agreement? Maybe if all the parties are from the same country, we can enforce it easily. But what happens if parties are from different countries? Where do we go for enforcement? I mean, I'm from India. The other party is from the US. We have a proceedings done in Singapore. Where am I going to enforce this agreement if the other side does not comply? So this was a major difficulty. I mean, the difficulty of enforcement, mind you, is always there when it comes to legal matters and when it comes to adjudication, litigation, or in arbitration. Quite often, and very often, we face difficulties in enforcement. So it's not unique to mediation, but this was a question being asked, because people are hesitant to get into something new unless they're fully satisfied. And we couldn't really meet this by saying that, well, your mediation agreement will get converted into an arbitral award by consent, and therefore you can follow the New York Convention or the Geneva Convention in enforcing such an award. It was an adequate answer, but it wasn't a superfine answer. It's not the answer you need for conviction. So we grappled with this. And here I must pay tribute to my friends from Singapore. There are many of them, several of them who are involved in bringing this convention through. George Lim and Vishwa and Aloysius and Edwin. And they played exemplary roles in, really taking up the cause of this Convention for Enforcement of Mediation Settlements. And they brought this through UNCITRAL, the United Nations trade body, which is responsible for all our earlier conciliation laws, etc. And therefore, it's appropriate that, this convention came to be signed in Singapore and is known as the Singapore Convention. I can think of no more appropriate name for the convention. Now, one important thing at the beginning is that the framers of this convention focused very early on the fact that across the world there were two broad terms being used to describe this consensual process. One was mediation, the other was conciliation. And the term conciliation is an earlier term. So you will find many statutes, especially the earlier era, which use the term conciliation. And you will find later statutes which use the term mediation. Just one moment. Later enactments use the word mediation, and that started becoming popular from the 70s. Now, this has caused tremendous confusion world over. You know, what is mediation? What is conciliation? Is there a difference between the two? When am I a mediator? When am I a conciliator? Is this a mediation agreement or a conciliation agreement? And I think very wisely, those who framed this said, let's put an end to this confusion. Let's recognize A, that both terms basically mean the same process. A process which is voluntary, consensual, where the decision making is in the hands of the parties. And whether you call it mediation or this is the process. We also said, let's realize that the term mediation is more in vogue. And therefore, let's use the term mediation from hence on. So UNCITRAL, which all the way along the way had used the term conciliation to refer to this process, has now switched to using mediation, while recognizing that the two mean basically the same thing. Having said that, there are some other residual difficulties about conciliation, because it has come to mean multiple things in multiple statutes. In some statutes, it's not really consensual. The person goes much more, and therefore we have to iron out those statutes. But to avoid confusion, we simply go on the basis that the term mediation is preferable, that this is a consensual process, and therefore mediation, it will be mediation or any other name, including conciliation. The two are synonymous, so we need not spend more time in getting confused. This is what UNCITRAL has done, and I think this is what India will do when it comes to formulating its macro legislation. Yes, so they sought to address this problem of enforcement. And the convention is in a sense, it's a very simple convention. It calls upon countries to be signatories to the convention. The purpose of the convention is one and only one, that you provide an enforcement mechanism for a mediation agreement reached between parties who are from different nationalities, from different countries. It enables each country to formulate its own law for the purpose of giving effect to the convention. So there are two things. One is the convention, which sets out the broad principle. The other is the particular law by which this principle is given effect to. Now, all that countries need to do is to be parties to the convention. Then they have the option. They can either formulate, they can go adopt the model law prescribed by the convention, or they can formulate their own model law, their own law to be in line with the convention. So basically that's all there is. There is a mediation agreement, and if one party refuses to abide by the agreement, the other party can take the party to a court of law in the court of any country which is a signatory to the convention. Please note, not necessarily the country of the defendant. You can go to any country which is a signatory, and you can say, here is a mediation agreement, it is signed, it is enforceable because this country is a signatory to the convention, please grant me relief in enforcement. So this is a huge bonus because it takes away the fear of, people will not comply. Now, having said that, I'm going to tell you something very interesting. And that is, do you know there are 100 mediation agreements, 99 point whatever percentage of those never go to a court seeking enforcement. You're amazed when you hear this because you always think in a law decree or an arbitral award, you need to go to court to get enforcement. The fact is, in a mediation, both parties have signed an agreement which they both think is in their best interests. Why should they go to court for enforcement? They just go about implementing it themselves. So 99 point whatever percentage of mediation agreements never in fact need the enforcement of a court. It's a rare mediation agreement which needs to be taken to court because one party is not willing. In my 30 years of practice as a mediator, I've not had a single case which has required a party to go to court to enforce a mediation agreement. There have been some cases, a few, where a party after signing realized that it couldn't comply with the terms because something had changed. But they always came back to the mediation table and said, can we rework this, please? Can I have a little more time? Can we rework something? And that got done. They never went to court to challenge the agreement. Okay? So that is a very important thing you need to bear in mind when we talk about enforcement. Now enforcement is there, it must be had. But there are also grounds, valid grounds on which a person may say, look, you can't enforce this agreement against me. And Section 5 of the Convention sets out those grounds for relief. So those grounds are, I hope all of you have Section 5. I wish I was conducting a class. I would ask everybody to put up their hands and say, do you all have Section 5? And I would point to some of you here and say, well, please read it out. Can I do that in this, Chitrangada? Is that possible? Can I point to Supreet Kaur and say, Supreet, can you tell me what Section 5 is? Is that possible?
Sir, I will have to check that with Rahul Kumar.
Next time, I very much like to do that with a class.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
But I will definitely request Rahul that we should have a session wherein all the students can be, they can do that. Yes, so
you can do that, so I can make sure they get their homework. I had plenty of teachers harassing me when I was young. I'd like to pay it back in kind now that I'm old.
It will indeed be an honor for us if that happens. I will speak to Rahul about it.
I do that.
Yes, sir.
All right. So Section 5, either the defendant can say, look, the settlement agreement is null and void, or look, read it, it's not even final, or it's been modified, or you can say, I performed the agreement already, or you can say, look, the plaintiff is asking for the relief which is contrary to the agreement, or that the mediator misconducted himself. There's a serious breach to what the mediator did, or that the mediator was biased. Now, please look and see, these are all very common sense grounds for objection. These are basic grounds of objection on the grounds of fairness. They have nothing to do with the facts of the case. They have nothing to do with the law. So you can't question a mediation agreement on the facts of the case or the law. You can only say, look, some fundamental, fairness thing has not been complied with. Or that, the other thing that there's something a public policy, that to grant this would be contrary to the public policy of the country. Now, public policy has been interpreted and misinterpreted in many judgments, but I think we're all coming now to the line of thinking where it has to be something grave and extreme for a court to say, I will not give effect to a mediation agreement with the ground of public policy. And really that would mean, for example, supposing an agreement violated, the environmental law. Let's say it permitted a defendant, to discharge effluent. Supposing two people are fighting over, they have a common boundary wall, and then there is a, effluent to be discharged. And they say that, well, rather than discharging it your land or mine, we'll discharge it in the river. And that's the mediation agreement. Now, no court will give effect to that. They will say this is contrary to the public policy of this country. You cannot go about diluting our water bodies. So public policy, therefore, is something important, very fundamental, fundamentally legal. Therefore, we will not give effect to it. So these are basically the grounds on which you can you can say you can resist an agreement. Otherwise, you have no other grounds. A court will give effect to it and will direct that the processes of law be followed. Now, the convention, you see, there are two ways in which you can have, broadly, the convention envisages, um, now either you can say, a mediation agreement will have the status of an arbitral award by consent. Now, once you give it the status of an arbitral award by consent, it is virtually an award which can't be challenged, and therefore a court will give effect to it. But when it comes to countries creating their own law, can you all hear me? Because you're off I can't see any of you. Can you hear me? Yes?
Yes, sir, we can hear.
We can hear you, sir.
Right.
We can.
So one option is, you enforce it as an arbitral award by consent. You take it to a court and you say, here is an arbitral award by consent. Again, a court will not hear objections to it. They will say, well, it's a consent award. Or, as we may do in India, we may give it straight away the effect of a decree of the court. So that we even skip the arbitral award by consent mechanism. We straight away say, this will be implemented as a decree of court. There's an option there. Each country can provide the option it wants. But the point is, at the end of the day, it should be enforceable without difficulty, without question. Except for those cases where, as I said, fairness would require that this should not be given effect. So that really is the substratum of the convention. It's a very simple convention. There are some issues that are, governments can make some reservations. As in all conventions, a state can say, well, we don't agree to this aspect or that aspect. They have the right to do that. One thing they could, make reservation on is whether they want to subject the government itself to this convention. That is, in disputes where the government is involved as a government, not really a PSU or a public sector undertaking, whether the government itself can be subjected to this convention. In other words, if the government of India signs an agreement, can it tomorrow be taken to court in Switzerland and we say that enforce this convention now against the government of India? So there are cases where government may say, we don't want to subject government to this, but we'll subject others. I know my Singapore friend is smiling. Singapore doesn't like too many reservations in this convention. I know, yeah. So there we are. So this is the convention itself. Now let us set this convention, in a backdrop. What has this convention done? This convention has now become, in simple terms, a mantra. A mantra, let me explain for Julian, you know what a mantra is, a magic word. So this Singapore Convention has become the magic word for international business. To say you ought to convert to mediation because of the Singapore Convention. And when they say, well, what's it all about? Simply the convention allows you to enforce a mediation agreement without fuss or difficulty and immediately. And that is music to the ears, because in every litigation or arbitration where a business house has been involved, they never get enforcement. They may get reference to an arbitrator, they may be able to go to court, they may get a verdict or an award, but they never get enforcement easily. So to tell them that you're going to get enforcement, yes, for the asking is something which is music to the ears. So I think in terms of international business and big business locally, the Singapore Convention is going to be one big factor for the push towards gaining acceptance and mediation. So that really is so much on the convention. As I said, the convention is a simple convention. It's a simple but powerful idea. It's not a complicated thing. It reminds you that most, powerful ideas are simple ones. And they've stuck to that simplicity and that directness in the Singapore Convention. I'm glad, they didn't work it like many other statutes where you get lost in confusion. I'll give you a nice rhyme about the parliamentary draftsman. I read it many years back. It says, I'm the parliamentary draftsman. I make the country's laws, and of half the country's litigation, I'm undoubtedly the cause. I employ a kind of English which is hard to understand. And though the purists don't like it, or the lawyers think it's grand. So that is your usual style of parliamentary draftsmanship, which is complex, not easily understandable, and gives rise to confusion and multiple interpretation. But the Singapore one is a very nice model of a clean, direct piece of draftsmanship. So, those who did it deserve to be congratulated. So let me now frame the convention in the backdrop of India now. And let's see where we stand with mediation in India. In literature, you have four horsemen of the apocalypse, and they're meant to be, dreadful horsemen, war and pestilence and death and grief. But there are also, if you do some reading, four beneficial horsemen of peace, of health, of good things and new beginnings. I think for mediation, we have four beneficial horsemen now. One is the Singapore Convention. The other is India's pre-institution mediation scheme in its Commercial Court Act, brought about in 2018. A very good idea, but not well provided for in its rules. I think they messed it up in its rules. So it's really, as it is in the rules, it's very, very difficult and unwieldy. And I'm glad somebody's taken it to court. I think this is, Sanpreet, you've taken it to court, right? You've taken it to court, right? You've questioned, you've said this should be implemented properly, right?
Right, sir.
Yeah, please do a good job. It's very important.
Thank you so much, sir.
It can be implemented well if you follow two basic principles. Mediation is all about party autonomy. Especially in commercial matters, you must first give the disputing parties the right to choose their mediator. If you give them that right, they will select the person in whom they have trust and faith, and they are halfway home to an agreement. At the same time, the state should provide the facility for those who cannot get their own mediator. And therefore, whether it is NALSA or MCPC, we must have a system by which we say, if you can't find your own mediator, here you are. You come to us, we've got good mediators. So if you have this dual track operating, you will have an excellent system for pre-institution mediation. But if you don't do it on these lines, you'll end up, with a bureaucratic mess if you think that only government should not be appointing mediators for everybody. So please, Sanpreet, this is now on your shoulders to do a good job, and it's important. So pre-institution mediation is a huge pillar, because commercial cases are the bulk of cases in anywhere. And these cases are about 3 lakhs in volume. So if you can take a great mass of these cases to mediation, have them settled, can you imagine the load off the court? And can you imagine the lessening of tension in the minds of people? And the productive activity that can take place on the ground, because properties and assets are not caught up in litigation. And this is the way you will professionalize mediation as a practice. Mediation started by people volunteering their efforts, on a part-time basis after court work. It can never succeed that way. It must offer professional reward and avenue for growth. We must be able to pay mediators well. They must be able to generate money and income. And people are willing to pay mediators well. We just need to provide the facility and the mechanism to do so. Persons are perfectly happy to pay mediators because they're getting good results in good time. There's never a problem about that. Okay, so if we professionalize it, and this is the best time for it. The third horseman is COVID. For all the wrongs and the ills it's brought about, COVID has brought about a realization that we can operate with the technology we have to fashion things, instruments which are faster and quicker and more convenient. Just look at this webinar. Prior to COVID, would you guys have thought about putting this through on a Sunday morning with Julian from Singapore and me from Chennai and all of you from multiple places? Look at the number of webinars we've done with friends from here and abroad, getting together, people from wherever, multiple parts of the globe. Look at the kind of mediation that's happening. As I was telling somebody the other day, I get a call at 8:30 in the evening. Somebody says, sir, a major contract is breaking down now. Can we have your time now? At 9:30, just 1 hour later, there are 6 parties from 6 different places with 3 advisors from 3 different places, all sitting with me to work out what can be done. And by 10:30, they've decided, okay, we're not going to break this contract. This is what we're going to focus on tomorrow, day after, to see how it can work. Where on earth would you have got that without COVID? So COVID has given you something. So, and I think COVID has given us online mediation. And that's going to stay, irrespective of what happens, after lockdown, etc. Online mediation is here to stay. I think it will grow bigger and bigger and bigger. And online is very well suited to mediation. We have difficulties with the court and online because that's not our natural environment and habitat and the way we function. I really can't think of a court proceeding as a across-the-table business with a judge. It's a public setting. But mediation is perfect for online because it's discussion, confidential, private discussion. And the fourth, I think, pillar will be the legislation which India hopefully will fashion well for mediation. A good comprehensive legislation which will handle the process, it will handle accreditation, training, requirements, quality, ethics, court annex, private mediation, cross-border, online, everything. So that also I think it will get set soon. So yes, you have 4 good horsemen to take the carriage of Indian mediation. So that's it from me as a as the first part of this morning. Thank you.
Over to you, Chitrangada. You may take
Thank you,
question
sir.
after.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your insights. Indeed, it was a session which gave us a lot of to think about what is actually mediation and what is the Singapore Convention of Mediation. I myself have personal questions since we were talking about the online mediation due to COVID. So, sir, is it possible in family law matters also, like the matters that we have in court and we are directed for mediation? There, is it possible if we do a online mediation between the parties?
Yeah.
We request the mediators.
Courts are now working out a guideline protocol for court annex mediations online. In fact, Madras High Court is doing it now. We have a draft, so we're working on a guideline protocol. I'm sure other courts, MCPC will also do it soon. And so we will have a protocol by which we enable online mediation for all court-referred matters. And the registry will get involved in linking parties, in explaining mediation, and in setting up the mechanics of it, choosing the portal and the web system, and linking parties and mediators. So yes, it will be part of the practice.
So, but the clients feel that it will not have the required emotional atmosphere which is there when you sit face to face and do the mediation.
I agree, and there is a yes and no to it. Okay. There is a directness about immediate face-to-face contact. There is a richness and immediacy, a directness. But there is also a little safety in being behind a screen and not in front of the person who's been harassing you. There is also safety. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. So a skillful mediator can work through it. If you have good technology, if you have clarity on the screen, and you have a good enough screen system, and you focus on the person, a skillful mediator who's trained enough to say that, look, in these cases, make a little more effort towards establishing a personal contact and a personal line of communication. We'll make allowance for that. It can come through.
Thank you, sir. I will request the attendees to put forward their questions, please. The first question is by Hamdan.
Hamdan, you may unmute yourself and ask yourself.
Hello, sir. Very good morning. Thank you for your valuable time in providing us your insight on mediation. Earlier, you mentioned about the importance of the reading materials. Would be grateful if you could share some of the list that you think is important and valuable for us to read through before getting into mediation in detail.
The organizers of this program will be required to do their individual homework and not double me on this matter.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, Chitrangada is up to you now.
Yes, sir. So the next question is by Devargyam.
I'll give you some suggestions. You look at the, I think the MCPC manual has some some list of bibliographies. What I would request you to do is, how big is your program on mediation? How many hours?
The program can continue as long as
Well, then I would suggest I'll give you a couple of names of my my colleagues who are good with, we've devised something for the law schools. So you'll have to sit and see, well, you have to say, well, we want to structure for a group of this profile a reading list. And this is the kind of time they have to spend on reading. You need to look at that whole thing and then say, well, what kind of a reading list? You need basic material on mediation. And then you may need some add-ons. Okay, so a couple of books and a few add-ons and linkages to web resources. I'll give you a couple of names. You can sit with them and fashion it well, not off the cuff.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that's a good one. Hamdan, good question. I hope you get involved in fashioning this. Which year are you?
Sir, actually, I'm a recent graduate of LLM from Robert Gordon University. I majored in arbitration, but mediation is something that I'm quite interested to move on.
Then why don't you work with these organizers in fashioning the course yourself now? Come on, get involved.
Definitely, sir. I will be very much happy to support them.
All right.
Debargya Mitra, you have a question to sir. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for the session. I think you already answered the first question. I wanted to ask a book apart from Getting to Yes by Robert and Fisher. So, sir, I would like to ask you, sir, how effective is online mediation in comparison to like real life mediation, where the mediator can get to understand the body language, vocal gestures, and every other thing? Like the same thing is not available online, sir.
Well, I think we make too much of this body language. And I mean, if you have a big enough screen in front of you, I operate, let me tell you, I don't operate with a laptop. I operate with a full-size computer screen. So they're able to see me fully as though they're sitting across me at the table. And I'm able to see them fully. I have an advantage. And it's not very expensive to do that. You just get a big, what do you call it, a monitor, and you attach it to your laptop, and you get a big enough screen, and it makes a world of difference. Just try that. So I would say no less effective in that sense, and far more effective in terms of convenience of meetings. I mean, you can schedule meetings at the drop of a hat. You can say, fine, we've discussed so far. We need to focus on one thing. Let's do that. And then in the old days, you had to go back and come again and meet again after 3 weeks. Now you can just say, I'll sit with you for half an hour tomorrow morning. This is so much more convenient. But
Thank
it's
you,
either or, nobody's saying you must choose one or the other. When you can do straight away face-to-face, do face-to-face. And you can even combine face-to-face with online for mediations. So you have both. This binary, either or, we should get it out of our heads. We're now in the happy position of having more than one.
Sir, I'm asking another question. It might be out of the context, but sir, is online arbitration also as successful as online mediation?
I don't see why it shouldn't be.
I see, sir.
I don't see why it shouldn't be. When it comes to examining a witness, yeah, it's fine. I don't see why it shouldn't be as successful. Because you see, nowadays you have very good online systems, where virtually you feel as though you're in the arbitration room. I think, Julian, why don't you, you have in Singapore, I know a very good room where you conduct these online mediations.
Mr. Panchu, yes.
Yeah, you're a very good room where, it's a wide screen and it's as though you're in the presence of each other. So perhaps you should give a demonstration of this to these youngsters.
I will, Mr. Panchu. In fact, when I spoke yesterday,
Yeah.
I showed the very same photo that I think Wee Ming showed today.
Yeah.
And it depicts everybody in a room
Right.
around a table. And people have laptops, but they're also looking remotely at a big screen
Yes,
as you are.
Yeah.
And with that, a lot of your gestures can be
Yeah.
observed
Yeah,
directly.
Exactly, yeah. So it's not just, sitting across with two small laptops. It can be much, much wider and better than that.
Mr. Panchu, actually, since we're on this topic, Maybe I can ask you a question if you don't mind me hijacking the airtime for the students. And I was very taken by an analogy of the four horsemen and the carriage. And it took me to think about COVID as a horseman and who will be on that carriage. And referring to the article that you penned for the Hindu about COVID-19, online mediation, and the possibility of forgetting that there are people in our midst who are less technologically adept and savvy and no access to a laptop, even the low-cost small laptops. Have you had a chance to ruminate further and have further thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, thank you. Very good question. What he's talking about, to explain, is an article I wrote for the Hindu a short while back, and maybe I would send you the link. You could include it in your reading material if you like. Basically, where I explored the idea of online mediation, I set out how it can work, what are its advantages, what are its cautions and limitations. And one thing I focused on was that this is technology. And we have people in India, some of whom will not have this technology, many of whom will not be familiar with it, and who cannot access it as well. And I said access to this technology is access to justice. If this technology is my portal to dispute resolution, then it is access to justice. And if you, the state or the court, want me to use this, then you must ensure that I'm not handicapped. And therefore, especially the court system, and this is a part of the protocol we are framing, that we will make sure that anybody who wants the assistance of the mediation center in securing the help for technology will be given that assistance. So it'll be somewhat like a legal aid. We are inviting you to do this online. If you think you don't have the resources, you want help, then yes, we provide you somebody who can help you with the technology. And unless the mediator is satisfied that the weaker party has adequate access to technology, the mediator will not continue the mediation.
Thanks for a very thoughtful response, Mr. Panchu. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would request Chetna Bhargav to put forward the question, please.
Ma'am, am I audible?
Yes, you are, please. Go on.
Good morning, sir. I'm Chetna Bhargav, a fourth-year law student. And my question to you, sir, is that while providing sanctions for non-enforcement of the settlements, would it push people to take the process more seriously? What is your opinion about the same?
Sanctions for?
So non-enforcement of the settlement, would it push people to take the process more seriously? What is your opinion?
Non-implementation? You mean
Sir,
sanctions?
non-enforcement.
Meaning if somebody doesn't comply with the mediation agreement?
Yes, sir.
Look, frankly, it's unnecessary. As I said, 99.5% people comply with mediation agreements. And the ones who don't, court will sort it out quite easily. You don't have to get into, command and punish mode in mediation. Think of mediation differently. You just don't have to because it's not required. As I said, I've never found a mediation agreement in my whole life, my years of practice, where people have not complied with it. So this command and punish, sanction and prosecute is Purana Zamana. Yes, it's in the old Sholay days of Gabbar Singh, the Daikop, let's kill everybody kind of thing. This is new thinking, new age, new technology. Now is a time when you should think of incentivizing, not punishing. How do you incentivize people to come to mediation? How do you incentivize a party to adopt mediation? And that you can do by telling a party that, look, if you want to go to court, please understand that the time of the court is not yours just because you have some fancy lawyers, with fancy law firms and fancy law students. I just thought I'll include all of you in this. Please understand that the time of the court is there for people who need justice. If you can sort out your case amongst yourselves with an arbitrator, mediator, do that. Don't take our time. And if we find that you've taken our time unreasonably, we will penalize you. And I think if the courts have a system by which they have an early neutral evaluation, if it's a complicated, complex matter, get a retired judge along with a senior mediator. Ask them to do a neutral evaluation. and give that to the parties, and with that the parties can find work for a settlement. Now, most often they'll succeed, but in case they don't, there is a neutral evaluation which says what the likely outcome of this case will be. If a party ignores that and still wishes to pursue litigation and fails in litigation, then subject that party to very heavy costs. You do that once, twice, thrice, in terms of a gas contract, something which costs, billions of rupees. Subject the party to heavy costs, saying you wasted our time. And then what's the fun? Incentivize and disincentivize. This is the mantra of the new age.
Thank you, sir. I'm
Now
obliged.
change your thinking. No longer command and punish, but incentivize and disincentivize.
So my question on that is that it might act as a deterrent for the litigants, but will it?
It should act as a deterrent for the powerfully rich litigant.
That's right, sir.
Because we want to open the court to the poor litigant. We want the court to say we exist here for people at large who need us, who but for us are at the mercy of evil forces or whatever. They need us. You don't need us. You can go to an arbitrator or the mediator. So we want to clear our decks of people like you, so we can deal with the landless. We can deal with cases of destitutes. We can deal with people who are dispossessed, the marginalized. These are people on the fringes of society who need the court.
Thank you, sir. Thanks. Clint Kulako is the next person who wants to put forward the question. Clint. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Clint, can you unmute yourself, please?
Clint.
Okay, Chitrangna, you may ask on his behalf.
Yes.
Clint. His name is Clint.
Am I audible?
Yes, Clint.
Hello, ma'am.
Answer that only.
Yes, respected. Yes, sir. My name is Clint, and my question to
I
you
will
is
answer your
whether
question only
the
if you
issue
accept
pertaining
it.
to land acquisition matters. So
Yeah.
can it be?
Good. Go on.
Yeah, respected sir. Good morning. My question to you is whether the issue pertaining to land acquisition matters can it be settled through mediation rather than going into litigation, and can we settle it through online mediation? If yes, sir, won't there be any possibility that the mediation in the land acquisition matters?
Well, it's a nice question. It's in two parts, really. It's a nice big question for a Sunday morning. Mediation and land acquisition matters. It can be done provided that, the dispute which people are talking about is a generic one. See, if it pertains too much to, this particular plot, that particular plot, is it near to the road, is it this or that road, you may have to sit down face to face. But if you have a generic question, as to, on the land acquisition, let's say that the application of a certain formula will help to resolve 50, 100 matters.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that you could do that. That's one way of doing it. There's no reason why, but you see the problem there really, Clint, is not so much the efficacy of mediation. The problem there is you need to authorize people in government to come and take decisions in mediation. There's no point if the land officer says, sir, I think this is what he's asking for is reasonable, but I can't agree. I have no authority. So unless government empowers people at the decision-making table to say, yes, you have a certain negotiating limit, you can go up to this range, then you can settle. There's no reason why you can't settle land acquisition matters. But what is that? It's a question of a rate. The government is offering a rate, this man wants something higher. You work out some via media. I'll give you, yeah, sorry. I was hoping your second name would be Eastwood,
Yes, sir.
but you disappointed me, Clint. Are you from Goa? Is he still on?
My papa named me Clint after Clint.
Your dad named you Clint after Clint Eastwood. There you are.
Only
What I thought.
because he was a great.
He was a great fan of Clint Eastwood.
Yes, sir. My father named me as Clint
Yeah.
because he was a great fan
There I thought.
Sir, thank you for answering my question.
You're most welcome. And next time I see you, just show those 6 guns.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Vishal Sharma, you can ask your next question, please. Please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon, sir. Hello. I hope you're doing well. So my question to you is, online mediation has been a lot talked about in the recent days, and we've been talking about the same for the past 3-4 months. Now the thing is, online mediation might be accessible for people who might have the resources, right? And for people like you and me who still getting on this webinar and attending the same. But for people who are not having the resources, who do not even know how to access internet, how are they going to be involved in online mediation? Because the thing is, a mediation is between parties and can happen between parties who have no access to the internet as well. And problems such as family matters or anything like that, it involves people from the lowest strata. So how are they going to be catering? How are we catering to such demands of the people? Or
Let me tell you one thing. You know, I sometimes think that this thing is a little overblown, because I think advocates across the board are familiar with computers and laptops. So sometimes I think we may, in fact, be worrying a little too much when we think that, you know, junior members of the bar who are, may not be able to access online mediation possibilities. I think it's a little blown, although I think that bar associations should actively pursue, and this, Sanpreet, again, you may look at, why don't you, Youth Bar Association, formulate programs for training young advocates on online, okay? I'm sure you'll find the bar association is willing to help with that. So I don't think it's that much of a problem. But let me say one thing: there is a line, and that line is that the litigant must be able to put across his case and participate effectively in online mediation. That line must be achieved by the litigant with the help of his lawyer, or if that's inadequate, then with the help of the court registry offering a legal aid in terms of online resources. If that bar cannot be met, then online should not be conducted. Finished.
That looks like a far-fetched dream, sir, for
It doesn't,
providing.
not at all. Number one, no worthwhile dream is far-fetched. Keep that in your mind. Number two, this is certainly not far-fetched. It's very doable. Extremely doable. For the registry to say that we want to see, you know, see, people don't have access to a computer, then don't force them into it. If they say we don't know this at all, then don't force them into it. But if they say we need some help and then we can manage, give them that help. At the end of the day, it must be the litigant's choice. The litigant says, I'm comfortable. And the mediator on top of that assures himself. But if either of these is absent, don't do online mediation. Finished. The litigant must say yes and the mediator must say yes.
Absolutely,
There's
sir.
nothing
Thank you.
so difficult about that, Chitrangada.
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot, sir. So the next question is very relevant, and I think it is important for all the students as well as for us young lawyers to know. Gagandeep, please put forward your question.
Ma'am, he has requested you to take the question because.
Sure, I will take the question. So, sir, his question is, what qualification should a recent law graduate from India possess for becoming a successful mediator? What should he do after he completes law? And what training should he undergo, and how can he join the institutions for mediation as a mediator?
This is my topic or somebody else's topic for next week? All right. Well, look, if you're interested in mediation, I don't think you have too much of mediation in your current law courses. We are in fact working with the Bar Council to formulate something for universities to improve their mediation curriculum. So I think you have very minimal mediation as it is. So if you're looking to further your interest in mediation, I think Bombay has just started a master's course in mediation. That's the first one I think in India which has started. So you'll have to see, where you can get some more learning done. There's not too much, academic learning which is available out there. I don't think, these short-term courses of 5 hours and 10 hours or 40 hours, 50 hours is really adequate. You need much more. And I think, those who are involved in mediation learning in India today should devise these bigger, more substantive courses. Abroad, I guess maybe you can. I'm not too sure. I know you can do masters, I guess. But I think the idea is to pursue your interest. See, mediation is an opening field. 2 years back, if people said, is there a career for me in mediation? I would say, well, there will be, but I'm not sure when. Today, after the horsemen are on the scene, I say, yes, there is going to be. It's a question, I think, of pursuing your interest. And once you say, I'm going to pursue my interest, then you open yourself to reading, reading prescribed material, looking at courses. And I think there are courses, you can look at online courses. You can look to further your own reading. There's a lot of material on the net, I think, about mediation, which will help. But I think you should, attach yourself to a good mediation practitioner. In the old days, I mean, we had seniors, we followed them. We apprenticed ourselves to a senior, we followed that senior. I think you should attach yourself to a good mediation practitioner. How much of that you're going to do, I don't know. I know that I have a few colleagues who now do exclusively mediations, but they're not too many. That number will grow, but in the interim, I hope law firms now start hiring people for mediations. When I speak to law firms, I tell them that, look, earlier on, I would go after a law firm to say you must have mediation capacity in your firm. Today, I say I'm not the evangelist. I'm not, requesting you, but I'm telling you that if you don't incorporate mediation, you will get left behind because your foreign client will not prefer you. He will go to somebody else who gives him a mediation capacity. Why will he waste 10 years in India's courts on a case which he can resolve in 3 months and quickly and beneficially? So it's in your interest now. So I hope law firms start, getting to that. I think they will. I mean, they're canny chaps when it comes to these things. So the market will open up. So I would say pursue your interest, follow it, be with it. You guys are in a much better position than we were. 30 years back when I was starting to talk about mediation, people thought I was talking about meditation. People thought, wondering why I'm changing my professional profile. They used to come to my talks with yoga mats. With nothing. You guys have the world in front of you. So, relax, be happy, enjoy your Sunday. All right.
So we can take more questions if you're comfortable, sir, according to your schedule.
Well, yes, well, your time is up with me, but I like being with youngsters. So go ahead, I'll give you some more time.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Aryan Mudgil, you can put forward your question.
Good afternoon, everyone. Sir, thank you so much for the time. So my question is that can we have some of the, can you share some experience of yours in the Ayodhya case, and also how different and difficult is community mediation process currently in India? Because it was in raw form earlier with us, but at the current situation, how difficult it is and what are the challenges faced in a community mediation?
Yeah. I was expecting such question.
Yes, every panel somebody tries this, Sir, will you tell us something on Ayodhya? No way. Ayodhya is strictly confidential, it's out of bounds, and there is no way anyone will get to know anything. If I write a memoir, maybe God 30 years hence, one doesn't know. But Ayodhya is it's privileged, confidential, top secret, it's everything. Multiple files rolled into one. There is just no way any of that can come out. Because it's a very unusual kind of mediation. It's between communities, it's between that history of violence, it's between all kinds of possibilities in settlement, multiple parties, politics, the courts, the judicial, the parties. It's just everything rolled into one. And it's tucked away, with the 3 mediators. So there is just, I'm very sorry to disappoint you, nothing there.
So it's okay, sir.
Mediation, yeah, I'm sure you expected that, you knew this was coming, but a good try.
Yes, sir. Yes. So it was majorly asking that let's keep Ayodhya case apart, but what about the raw values which he had as panchayats and when
Yeah,
the
yeah,
community
I'm
mediations
I'm
happen
coming.
there.
See, community mediation.
Sir.
Community mediation really is two forms. One is where entire communities are engaged in a dispute. So you're disputing between, handling two communities, two factions. Mediation is good, is excellent. If you can get the right people with the right skills, with the right, connects with those communities, nothing like it. Panchayat is mediation done within a community setting, but it's not necessarily community mediation because panchayats will also sort out disputes between individuals. The panchayat system was good and bad. Good because they tried for a consensus, they tried to sort out things, they didn't want the conflict to foster. Bad because you got a lot of caste equations in it. There was dominance, there was hierarchical behavioral performance in the panchayat. So there were unfortunate things. But maybe, it's a time I think we need to relook some of those and say, well, can't we get in now, an improved form of community mediation in India? Certainly worth looking at. Certainly worth looking at.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the answer, sir.
Thank you, Arjun. Noel, sir, Noel has put forward this question and he's requested me to ask the question. How can mediation be effective in solving delinquent cases in financial sector?
Effective in solving
in financial sector, sir. Financial sector.
Why am I getting the feeling that I'm traveling well beyond my scope? Because I am, yes.
So we are young minds and we are open to good food for thought today.
But you cannot, I think you have a whole month of this going on. So don't finish off all your questions over here. You have other speakers coming in. Financial sector, good question again. The problem with the financial sector again is that you don't have checkpoints for, it's like having check dams. You don't allow water to just run off. You have check dams to control it. Similarly, when you look at designing strategies for financial sector, you must look at points where you can apply mediation and bring about a resolution between bank and debtor. Now, that comes at a stage where before, the insolvency process is set in motion, before a person is declared as insolvent. It should also come at a stage during proceedings before the IBC. During the IBC proceedings before the tribunal. So you should have multiple stages where it's possible for the banks and the creditors to sit across and try and find resolution. We are jumping too easily into, strapped assets. We're jumping too quickly into condemning assets as being non-performing. Whereas I think quite a few of them with some infusion of funds at the right time, the right way, can become performing assets. In the process, how much are we damaging our economy is a very important question. But I don't think we have the balance right. We need to have a balance that where a person can be assisted to recover, that person should be assisted. Where somebody is a defaulter, by virtue of being a defaulter, and then that's what they want to be, then they should be closed. But we haven't struck that balance. And it's a big issue.
Thank you, sir. Next question is also, it says that mediator has to follow procedure, whether the mediator has to follow procedural laws while presiding mediation process.
There is no great procedural law. You must follow, the procedural law is basically the law of, the basics, voluntariness. You never decide, always the parties who decide. Of confidentiality, maintaining all the safeguards. And the skills and techniques of mediation. Getting people to listen, opening up communication. See, there are some fundamental legal aspects such as voluntariness and confidentiality. Apart from that, there are skills and techniques. How do you conduct your mediation well? So yes, of course, you should follow those. But these are not, stratified like, the Code of Civil Procedure, where everything is rigid and straitjacketed. You must follow these. You must follow the spirit. Focus on the spirit behind these things. consensual process. You're here to get people get a good resolution, and to do it fairly, and to do it with their trust and for their benefit.
We'll take the last question for the day, sir. I request Mary Sport to please, if that's the correct pronunciation, Mary Sport to please ask her question.
Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Sir, good morning, sir. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to ask the question to you. Sir, I have two questions. One is, whenever we are talking about mediation, people often say that the courts are pending a lot of cases. So because of that, we have to go for mediation. Is it really advisable to say this? Does it necessary that because of pendency alone, we have to choose mediation? This is one. Second question, sir, how retired judges performing in case of mediation? As far as arbitration is concerned, there are a lot of criticism about retired judges, especially in India. So I would like to know your view on how they are performing in mediation. Thank you, sir.
I would like to know your background.
Sir, I am working as an assistant professor of law at Gujarat National Law University.
Because these are two excellent questions.
Yes, thanks.
These are excellent questions. I think you're right. We should not advocate mediation just to lessen the burden of the courts.
Yes.
That's a very secondary reason. The main reason for mediation to be used in a case is that it gives you a better resolution.
Yes, yes.
It gives you a better outcome, a better solution. It respects relationships. It's better for the parties, and it's cost and time efficacious. It's party benefit, not court benefit. The fact that it reduces the burden of the courts is secondary. It's important, but it's secondary. The second one, retired judges. You must be careful of retired judges in mediation. If a retired judge thinks that he can conduct a mediation by being a judge, then that's a mistake, and one should not go to such a person to be a mediator. But if a retired judge is willing to use his, the wisdom and his knowledge that he acquired, but be willing to learn that mediation is a completely new method, is a different method, where really he has to facilitate and help the parties to arrive at a solution, that he's not in the driver's seat, but must help the parties, then that retired judge can make a good mediator. So it all depends on the amount of unlearning. I stress unlearning. I think in this case it is unlearning which is more important than learning. But if a retired judge can do this, then I think judges can make good mediators.
Thank you, sir.
But if sitting judges could be mediators, I think completely not. I abhor the idea of a sitting judge acting as a mediator, even in a case where he says, I'm not going to dispose of the case if it doesn't succeed mediation. I think it is completely opposed to all canons of mediation that we should ever have a sitting judge as a mediator. And I was greatly resistant when the MCPC had that idea. Fortunately, I think they're trying to give that up, but that's a completely objectionable. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, sir. Thanks a lot, sir, for your insights and, giving us a new perspective to mediation law altogether, sir. I'm sure the students and all of us young lawyers, professors attending the program are equally privileged to have heard you, sir. I hand over the mic to Sanpreet, sir.
Thank you so much, Chitrangna. I have to propose vote of thanks for today's session. So we came to an end to our 9th session, and tomorrow we would have the conclusive session. A name, Sriram Panchu sir, a name which really needs no introduction, but when it comes to mediation. Sir, thank you so much for enlightening us, for sharing your views, for sharing your experiences, for guiding us. And I must take a liberty that alongside, I also propose my vote of thanks to Mr. Lin, who has been very kind to accept my invitation for today's session as well. Because yesterday when I requested him and I told that tomorrow's session would be taken by Sriram Panchu sir on Singapore conventions, he immediately, he was so generous to hear from you, sir. And he admired a lot to you. Thank you so much, sir. And you have rightly said that if this is the high time, if we don't incorporate mediation, we will lack. So on these perspectives, on these things, and on the material which is available, we have sought the indulgence of the Supreme Court to formulate a guidelines so that the pre-mediation litigations must also effectively work like other processes. There has been a guideline for that, but only 3 high courts are working on it. Thank you so much, sir.
Even there, Sampit, be careful, check what the high courts are doing. I'm not sure some of them are doing it the right way. So this needs to be gone into in depth. Feel free to give me a call on this. There's some background
Definitely.
work which has happened. I'm also a member of NALSA. But thank you very much, everyone. It's been a pleasure to be in this. And let me leave a little thought with you. When I think of the 4 horsemen and the time for mediation, which I think, the time for really setting mediation ground has come. There is a nice phrase which I think is appropriate for mediation and mediators now. It's called carpe diem. Carpe diem means seize the day. Okay, let's adopt that. All right, bye. Have a nice Sunday. Take care. Be safe.